Welcome to Fictional Scientist. After this video, reality will never feel the same again. What happens when the last conscious being in the universe closes its eyes? Physics has an answer to this question, and it's not the one you expect. The laws that govern reality itself suggest something deeply unsettling. If no one is looking, reality ceases to exist, not in a poetic sense, not as a metaphor, but as a literal, physical consequence of how the universe actually works. And here's the part that should keep you awake tonight. Maybe it already happened once. Let me be clear about something before we go any further. This isn't science fiction. This isn't philosophy dressed up as physics. This is the logical conclusion of experiments that have been conducted thousands of times, verified by dozens of laboratories, and confirmed by scientists who won Nobel Prizes for proving that the universe doesn't work the way we thought it did. The question we're going to explore tonight isn't whether consciousness matters to reality. That debate ended decades ago. The real question, the one that physicists whisper about in conferences but rarely discuss publicly, is this: what happens to everything when there's no one left to observe it? Right now, you're lying down, or sitting, or standing somewhere in the dark, listening to these words. Your body feels solid. The surface beneath you feels real. The air around you, the walls of your room, the ground under the building, all of it feels permanent, independent, existing whether you notice it or not. But that feeling, that deep certainty that the world is there, is a lie your brain tells you to keep you sane. Because the truth that emerges from a century of quantum mechanics is that reality doesn't work that way. The universe isn't a stage where things exist independently, waiting for us to discover them. The universe is more like a question that only gets answered when someone asks it, and if no one is there to ask, the question remains frozen, unanswered, unreal. Think about that for a moment. Really think about it. Not philosophically, physically. The chair you're sitting on, the air you're breathing, the light from distant stars, all of it requires an observer to collapse from probability into fact. Without observation, without measurement, without consciousness, it all dissolves back into a ghostly cloud of maybe. This isn't mysticism, this is data. Cold, hard, repeatable experimental data that has forced some of the smartest minds in history to accept a conclusion that sounds insane. The universe needs to be watched. It needs witnesses. It needs consciousness. And if that consciousness ever disappears completely, if the last observer blinks out, what's left? To understand why this question even exists, we need to go back. Back to the beginning of the 20th century, when physicists were still confident that reality was solid, predictable, and fundamentally independent of us. They believed in a clockwork universe. They believed that particles had positions and momenta, and that measuring them simply revealed properties that were already there. Then came the double-slit experiment, and everything broke. You might have heard of this experiment before. A beam of particles, electrons, let's say, is fired at a wall with two slits cut into it. Behind the wall is a detector screen. Simple enough. If electrons are little balls of matter like marbles, they should go through one slit or the other and hit the screen in two distinct bands. But that's not what happens. Instead, the electrons create an interference pattern. Waves, as if each individual electron went through both slits at once, interfered with itself, and landed on the screen as part of a ripple. This suggests that particles aren't solid objects. They're clouds of probability. They exist in multiple states simultaneously until something forces them to choose. But here's where it gets disturbing. Scientists decided to watch which slit the electron went through. They placed a detector at the slits to observe the electron's path. And the moment they did, the interference pattern vanished. The electron stopped behaving like a wave and started behaving like a particle. It went through one slit. It made a choice. It became real. The act of observation changed the behavior of reality itself. This result was so troubling that Einstein spent the rest of his life trying to disprove it. He refused to believe that the universe was that fragile. He famously said, "God does not play dice with the universe." He believed that particles had definite properties, hidden variables that we simply couldn't measure yet. He believed in an objective reality that existed whether we looked at it or not. But Einstein was wrong, and we know he was wrong because of a man named John Bell. In 1964, Bell formulated a mathematical test. He created an inequality, a limit that would definitively prove whether Einstein's hidden variables existed or whether reality truly was observer-dependent. The inequality was simple. If particles carried hidden instructions, if they had predetermined properties, then measurements on entangled particles could only be correlated up to a certain statistical limit. But if reality was truly probabilistic, if measurement created reality rather than revealing it, then that limit could be violated. For decades, the technology didn't exist to perform Bell's test accurately, but slowly the equipment improved. In the 1970s, John Clauser ran the first crude version. In the 1980s, Alain Aspect refined it. And in 2022, these scientists, along with Anton Zeilinger, won the Nobel Prize in Physics for proving beyond any doubt that Bell's inequality is violated. Reality isn't hiding information from us. Reality is genuinely indeterminate until it's measured. Particles don't have positions until you look. They don't have spins until you check. They exist in a haze of probability, a superposition of all possible states, and only collapse into a single definite state when an observer interacts with them. This is not interpretation. This is not philosophy. This is experimental fact. The universe does not exist in a definite state until it is observed. Let that sink in. Let it settle into your bones. The Nobel Prize in Physics was awarded for proving that objective reality, the idea that things have properties independent of measurement, is false. And now the question looms larger. If observation creates reality, what happens when there are no observers left? Before we can answer that question, we need to understand something crucial. What counts as an observer? Does it have to be human? Does it have to be conscious? Can a machine observe? Can a rock? This is called the measurement problem in quantum mechanics, and it's one of the deepest mysteries in science. Because the math of quantum mechanics doesn't tell us where observation begins. It doesn't give us a threshold. It doesn't say, consciousness starts here. In the Copenhagen interpretation, the dominant view for decades, the wave function collapses when a measurement is made. But measurement was never clearly defined. Some physicists tried to argue that any interaction counts. A photon hitting an atom is a measurement. A detector clicking is a measurement. Consciousness doesn't need to be involved at all. But that explanation has a fatal flaw. Because if any interaction counts as measurement, then the entire universe has been constantly measuring itself since the Big Bang. Every particle bumping into every other particle would collapse every wave function, but then there would be no superposition. There would be no quantum effects. And yet, quantum effects are everywhere. They're foundational. They're unavoidable. So the question remains, what is the special ingredient that collapses the wave function? What is it about measurement that forces reality to choose? Eugene Wigner, another Nobel laureate, suggested a radical answer: consciousness. He argued that only conscious observation can collapse the wave function because only consciousness lies outside the deterministic equations of physics. Everything else, detectors, atoms, photons, is just more quantum stuff governed by the same probabilistic rules. They don't force a choice. They simply entangle with the system, spreading the superposition further. But consciousness is different. Consciousness experiences. It has a perspective. It's a subject, not an object. And Wigner suggested that this subjectivity, this awareness, is what breaks the chain. It's what forces the universe to commit to a single history. If Wigner is right, then reality doesn't just need measurement. It needs someone to experience that measurement. It needs a witness. It needs a mind. And if there are no minds left, if the last conscious observer vanishes, then the wave function of the entire universe might simply stop collapsing. Reality would dissolve back into a superposition of all possible states. Not destroyed, not gone, just unresolved, frozen in a quantum limbo, existing and not existing simultaneously, forever. This idea that consciousness is necessary for reality sounds mystical. It sounds like religion dressed up as science. But one of the greatest physicists of the 20th century took it seriously. His name was John Archibald Wheeler. He worked with Niels Bohr. He coined the term black hole. And late in his life, he proposed something extraordinary, the participatory universe. Wheeler drew a simple diagram. It's shaped like a U. On the left side, at the bottom of the U, is the Big Bang, the birth of the universe. A burst of energy, the formation of particles, the beginning of time. The line curves down and across, representing billions of years of cosmic evolution. Stars form, galaxies condense, planets cool, chemistry becomes biology, biology becomes life, life becomes mind. And at the top of the right side of the U, there's an I, the observer, consciousness, us. But here's the twist. The eye isn't looking forward into the future. It's looking back, across the void, staring directly at the Big Bang on the left side of the diagram. Wheeler called this the self-excited circuit. He was suggesting something radical. The universe is a loop. It begins as a cloud of undefined quantum potential. It evolves for billions of years, blindly, randomly, until it generates observers. And those observers, by measuring the universe, by asking questions, by collapsing wave functions, reach back in time and make the past real. We're not just discovering the universe, we're creating it, retroactively. This isn't science fiction. Wheeler based this on real experiments, like the delayed choice quantum eraser, which shows that decisions made now can affect the behavior of particles in the past. The future reaches back and rewrites history, not metaphorically, physically. If Wheeler is right, then the Big Bang itself might not have been real until the first conscious observer looked back and collapsed it into a definite event. The universe spent 13.8 billion years in a state of quantum superposition, waiting for someone to observe it and give it a history. And that means if the last observer disappears, the loop breaks. The circuit goes dead. The past becomes uncertain again. The entire history of the universe, from the Big Bang to the final star, dissolves back into probability, not destroyed. Just unanswered. Let's imagine it. Let's walk through this scenario step by step as carefully as we can and see where it leads. Imagine the far future, trillions upon trillions of years from now. The stars have burned out. Black holes have evaporated into Hawking radiation. The universe has expanded so far that galaxies are no longer visible to each other. Space itself has stretched beyond recognition. The temperature of the cosmos has dropped to just a fraction of a degree above absolute zero. And somewhere in this cold, dark, infinite void, there's one last conscious being. Maybe it's a biological creature, impossibly old, sustained by some technology we can't imagine. Maybe it's an artificial intelligence, a thinking machine running on the faint energy of a dying star. Maybe it's something we don't have words for. A pattern of information, a ghost in the quantum field. It doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that it's the last one. The last thing in the universe capable of collapsing a wave function. The last observer. And it's alone. For billions of years, maybe longer, this observer has been watching the universe dissolve. One by one, the stars went dark. One by one, the other minds faded. Friends, companions, entire civilizations, all gone, swallowed by entropy, until only this one remains. And then it closes its eyes or shuts down or releases its final thought. However, consciousness ends for this being, it ends. The synapses stop firing, the processes cease. The awareness fades into nothing, and in that moment, what happens to the universe? If Wigner is right, if Wheeler is right, if consciousness is the thing that collapses reality from probability into fact, then the universe stops being definite. It stops having a single history. It stops existing in the way we understand existence. Think about what this means. Without an observer, there's no one to measure the position of that final black hole remnant. So it doesn't have a position. It's smeared across all possible locations. Without an observer, there's no one to collapse the quantum state of the cosmic microwave background. So it exists in superposition simultaneously at every possible temperature. Time itself becomes ambiguous, because time as we experience it is the sequence of events. But without an observer to establish a sequence, to collapse the now into a definite moment, time loses its structure. The past, present, and future blur together into a single frozen quantum state. The universe doesn't explode. It doesn't collapse. It doesn't end in fire or ice. It simply suspends. It becomes a ghost of itself, a mathematical abstraction, a wave function that no longer has anyone to collapse it. And here's the terrifying part. This state isn't temporary, because there are no more observers to bring it back. The universe has entered a condition from which it cannot escape, a permanent superposition, an eternal maybe, unless there's something we're not considering. There's a strange idea in quantum mechanics, an interpretation so disturbing that most physicists refuse to discuss it seriously. It's called quantum immortality, and it suggests something impossible, that from your own subjective perspective, you can never experience the end of your consciousness. Here's the logic. In the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, every time a quantum measurement occurs, the universe splits. One branch where the particle spins up, another where it spins down. Both are real. Both continue. You just can't see the other branch. Now apply this to consciousness itself. Every moment, your brain is subject to quantum events, neurons firing, neurotransmitters binding, tiny probabilistic processes that determine whether you remain conscious or not. If consciousness depends on these quantum processes, and if many worlds is true, then there's always at least one branch of reality where you remain conscious. You can't experience the branch where you die because in that branch there's no you to experience anything. So from your perspective, you always find yourself in the branch where you survived. You're immortal not because you can't die, but because you can't experience death. Extend this to the last observer. If quantum immortality is real, then the last conscious being in the universe can never actually be the last. Because from its perspective, there's always another branch where it continues, or where another observer suddenly appears, or where consciousness reemerges from the quantum foam. The observer can never close the loop because the loop refuses to close. This sounds like hope, like an escape hatch, but it's not, because it means the universe is trapped, locked in a state where observers must always exist, forced to persist by the logic of quantum mechanics, unable to ever reach the final silence. If this is true, then the last observer isn't a being waiting to die. It's a condition, a quantum necessity, an eternal witness that can never stop witnessing because the moment it tries, the universe forces it to continue in another branch. Consciousness isn't a passenger in the universe, it's a load-bearing wall. Remove it and the structure doesn't collapse. It simply refuses to let you remove it. The universe won't let its last observer die. But wait, let's rewind. Let's go backward in time instead of forward. Because if observers are necessary for reality to be definite, then what about the universe before observers existed? The Big Bang happened 13.8 billion years ago. Life on Earth began about 3.8 billion years ago. Consciousness, as we understand it, emerged maybe a few hundred million years ago. So for 13 billion years, the universe existed without observers. Stars formed, galaxies collided, planets cooled. Chemistry became complex. If no one was watching, was any of that real? This is the paradox Wheeler was trying to solve with his participatory universe. He suggested that the past doesn't become real until the present measures it. When we look at a photon from the cosmic microwave background, a photon that's been traveling for 13.8 billion years, we're not just seeing the past, we're collapsing it into a definite history. Before we looked, the past existed in superposition. All possible histories coexisted. The photon could have come from any point in the early universe, traveling any path. But the moment we detect it, we force the universe to choose one history, one path, one reality. If Wheeler is right, then dinosaurs didn't have a definite history until humans looked at their fossils and forced the past to commit to a timeline. The stars didn't have definite brightness until someone measured their light. The Big Bang itself was a cloud of quantum probability until the first conscious being looked back and said, "This is what happened." This sounds insane, but it's consistent with quantum mechanics. It's consistent with delayed choice experiments. It's consistent with the fact that measurement affects the past as well as the future. The universe before observers wasn't non-existent. It was unresolved, waiting, a book with pages that hadn't been read yet. And if the last observer disappears, the universe doesn't revert to emptiness. It reverts to that same unresolved state. The book closes, the pages blur back into potential, and all the history, all the structure, all the stars and galaxies and stories become uncertain again. Not erased, not destroyed, just forgotten. Let's go deeper. Let's talk about time itself, because time isn't what you think it is. It isn't a river that flows on its own. It isn't a dimension you move through like walking down a hallway. Time is something stranger, and it might require consciousness to exist at all. In the fundamental equations of physics, quantum mechanics, relativity, there's no arrow of time. The math works equally well forward or backward. You can reverse time in these equations and nothing breaks. A planet orbiting a star looks the same in reverse. A photon bouncing between mirrors is time symmetric. So why do we experience time as flowing forward? Why do we remember the past but not the future? Why do eggs break but never spontaneously reassemble? The answer is entropy. The second law of thermodynamics states that in a closed system, disorder always increases. This gives time a direction. We call forward the direction in which entropy increases. But entropy is a statistical concept. It's not fundamental. It's just a description of probability. Here's the disturbing part. Entropy requires multiple possible states. It requires a system that can be in many configurations. But if there are no observers, if there's no collapse of the wave function, then the universe doesn't have a definite state. It exists in superposition. And in superposition, entropy becomes meaningless. Think about it. Entropy is a measure of uncertainty. But in quantum mechanics, without observation, everything is uncertain. The entire universe is a cloud of probability. There's no before and after because there's no definite sequence of events. Time might literally stop without consciousness, not in the sense that clocks stop ticking, but in the sense that there's no longer any meaningful way to order events. The past and future collapse into a single timeless superposition. This is what Wheeler meant when he drew his U diagram. The observer doesn't just witness time, the observer creates time. By collapsing the wave function, by forcing the universe to choose a sequence of definite states, consciousness gives the universe a history, a story, a flow. Without observers, the story doesn't end, it just stops being told. The words remain on the page, but no one is reading them. And unread words, are they still a story? You might be thinking, what about artificial observers? If consciousness disappears, can't we build machines to keep observing? Can't we create artificial intelligences that collapse wave functions? This brings us back to the measurement problem, because we still don't know what counts as observation. We don't know what the special ingredient is. If observation is just any physical interaction, then yes, machines can observe. A camera detects photons. A computer processes data. These are measurements, technically. They interact with quantum systems and create records, but do they collapse wave functions? Or do they just become entangled with them? Here's the difference. Imagine a quantum particle in superposition, spin up and spin down simultaneously. You build a detector to measure it. The detector clicks if the particle is spin up. It stays silent if it's spin down. In the standard view, when the detector clicks, the wave function collapses. The particle definitely has spin up. Reality has chosen. But in a more rigorous view, the detector doesn't collapse anything. Instead, the detector itself enters superposition. In one branch, the detector clicked. In another branch, it stayed silent. Now the detector is both clicked and not clicked, just like the particle was both up and down. The superposition has spread. It hasn't collapsed. This is the Wigner's friend paradox we discussed earlier. Unless there's something outside the quantum system, something that doesn't obey the equations of quantum mechanics, the superposition never ends, it just grows. Wigner believed that consciousness was that outside element. Consciousness experiences. It has a subjective perspective. It sees the detector as clicked or not clicked, not both. And that subjective experience is what forces the collapse. If Wigner is right, then machines don't solve the problem. Because machines are just more physics, more quantum systems, more particles obeying the same probabilistic rules. They don't have the magic ingredient. Only consciousness does. So even if we fill the universe with sensors and computers and AI systems, if there's no subjective experience behind them, if there's no awareness, then they're not really observing, they're just entangling. And when the last conscious being disappears, the entire system, every machine, every sensor, every AI falls into superposition together. The universe becomes a ghost operating on autopilot, running processes that no one experiences. And without experience, without awareness, is it still real? But maybe we're thinking about consciousness too narrowly. Maybe consciousness isn't something that only exists in brains or complex nervous systems. Maybe it's everywhere. Maybe it's fundamental. This idea is called panpsychism, and it's gaining traction in philosophy and even physics. The argument goes like this. If consciousness is an emergent property of complex information processing, then why should it suddenly appear at a certain threshold? Why should there be a hard line between conscious beings and unconscious matter? What if consciousness is a spectrum? What if even an electron has a tiny primitive form of experience? Not thought, not awareness as we know it, but some faint rudimentary sensitivity to its own state, some minimal degree of what it's like to be that electron. If panpsychism is true, then the universe has never been without observers. Every particle, every field, every interaction is accompanied by a whisper of experience. Reality has been collapsing itself all along, because observation is something that consciousness does to matter. Observation is what matter does. It's built into the fabric of existence. In this view, the last observer problem disappears. Because consciousness never disappears, it just becomes more diffuse, more spread out. When complex brains vanish, consciousness doesn't end. It dissolves back into the quantum field where it's always been. This sounds comforting. It suggests that the universe can never be truly empty of observers because observation is woven into its structure. Even in the final cold darkness, when all stars are dead and all life is gone, the universe continues to observe itself at the most basic level. But there's a darker interpretation. If consciousness is fundamental and distributed, then maybe the concentrated, complex consciousness we experience, the kind that can think and feel and remember, is actually an anomaly, a temporary knot in the field. And when that knot unravels, what remains isn't observation in any meaningful sense. It's just sensitivity, the universe feeling itself in the vaguest, most primitive way. Not enough to collapse wave functions into definite states. Not enough to create history or structure or meaning, just enough to be dimly, eternally aware that it exists. Forever. Without form, without story, without end. A cosmic consciousness too diffuse to think, too scattered to dream, existing not as a mind but as an itch that can never be scratched, an awareness that can never focus on anything, a witness that can never see. Is that better than nothing, or is it worse? Let's return to the science, to the cold, hard predictions of thermodynamics and cosmology, because they paint a picture of the far future, and in that picture, there's a moment that deserves our attention. The moment of the final thought. The universe is expanding. The expansion is accelerating. Eventually, in trillions of years, the space between galaxies will grow so vast that they'll vanish from each other's sight. Each galaxy will be alone in an empty, black cosmos. After that, the stars will burn out. One by one, they'll exhaust their fuel and fade. White dwarfs will cool into black dwarfs. Neutron stars will grow cold. Black holes will be the only sources of energy, and even they will slowly evaporate through Hawking radiation. Eventually, the universe will reach a state called heat death. Maximum entropy, perfect equilibrium. The temperature everywhere will be the same, just a fraction of a degree above absolute zero. No energy will flow because energy only flows from hot to cold, and everything will be uniformly cold. In this state, nothing can happen. No stars can burn. No chemistry can occur. No structure can form. The universe becomes a still, silent ocean of near-nothingness. And consciousness requires energy gradients. It requires structure. It requires complexity. When the universe reaches heat death, the conditions that allow minds to exist will disappear. There will come a moment, an actual specific moment in time, trillions upon trillions of years from now, when the last possible thought occurs, the last neuron fires. The last process runs, the last subjective experience, whatever it is, wherever it happens, flickers and goes dark. That's the final thought. The universe's last observation of itself, and after that, nothing. Not in the sense of void or emptiness, but in the sense that there's no longer any way to collapse superpositions, no longer any way to create definite states. The wave function of the universe spreads out, uncollapsed, eternal. The equations continue. The quantum fields still exist, but they exist in a state of perfect ambiguity, a superposition of all possible configurations with no one to force a choice. This is the ultimate silence, not the absence of sound, but the absence of observation, the end of definiteness, the final unraveling of reality into pure probability. And the strange thing is, this might have already happened. There's a concept in physics called Poincare recurrence. It's a theorem that states if you have a closed system with a finite number of possible states and you wait long enough, Eventually, the system must return to its starting configuration. Think of shuffling a deck of cards. There are about 8 by 10 as far as 67 possible arrangements. That's an incomprehensibly large number, but it's finite. If you shuffle the deck forever, truly forever, you'll eventually repeat an arrangement you've seen before. You have to. You'll run out of new possibilities. Now apply this to the universe. The universe has a finite amount of energy, a finite number of particles, and while the number of possible configurations is staggeringly large, it's still finite. If the universe lasts forever, or if it goes through infinite cycles of death and rebirth, then eventually, the exact configuration of particles that exists right now must recur, not just something similar, the exact same arrangement. Every atom in your body in the exact same place, every neuron firing in the exact same pattern. You sitting here reading these words, experiencing this moment, will happen again and again and again and again, forever. This isn't reincarnation. Reincarnation suggests you come back as something different. Poincaré recurrence means you come back as you, exactly you, living this exact life, making these exact choices, feeling these exact feelings. You are not living your life once, you are living it infinitely many times, and you always have been. Now combine this with the last observer problem. If the universe reaches heat death, if the final thought occurs and observation ceases, then reality dissolves into superposition. But in superposition, time becomes meaningless. There's no sequence, no after. And in that timeless quantum state, waiting for eternity, eventually a fluctuation occurs, a random quantum event, a tiny pocket of low entropy. And if the fluctuation is large enough, it creates the conditions for structure, for complexity, for observation. A new observer emerges from the quantum foam, not created by anything, not evolving from anything, just appearing. Because in infinite time, even the most improbable things become inevitable. And that observer, by observing, collapses the wave function, creates a history, a timeline, a universe that appears to have existed for 13.8 billion years leading up to that moment. But did it? Or did the observer simply collapse a superposition that had been waiting outside of time? Did the past only become real the moment someone was there to observe it? If this is true, then the last observer might not be the end. It might be the reset button. The universe doesn't die when observation ceases. It pauses, and then it starts again and again and again. We might be living in the millionth iteration, or the trillionth. There's no way to know, because each time the universe reboots, it creates a history that makes it look like it's been here all along. The last observer becomes the first observer. The loop closes, and we're trapped in it, forever. There's another interpretation of all this, one that's gained surprising traction in recent years, even among serious physicists, the idea that we're living in a simulation. Think about it. If consciousness is necessary for reality to be definite, if observation collapses wave functions and creates the past, then the universe behaves exactly like a computer program running on a lazy evaluation system. In programming, lazy evaluation means the system doesn't calculate values until they're needed. It saves resources. If no one is looking at a variable, the program doesn't waste processing power determining its value. It just keeps it as undefined until someone asks. Quantum mechanics works the same way. Particles don't have positions until you measure them. The past doesn't have a definite history until you look. It's as if the universe is conserving computational resources, only rendering the details when an observer requests them. If we are in a simulation, if reality is a program running on some vast computer, then the last observer problem has a different meaning. Because simulations can be paused, they can be saved, they can be restarted. When the last observer in the simulation closes their eyes, the simulation doesn't crash, it just goes into standby mode, waiting. And maybe after some amount of time in the outside world, someone boots it back up. A new observer appears and the program continues, or maybe the simulation ends, the server shuts down, the data is deleted, and the universe, our universe, the only reality we've ever known, ceases to exist. Not dying, just turned off like a light bulb. No suffering, no void, just a clean stop. In this interpretation, the last observer isn't carrying the weight of reality's existence. They're just the final user, the last player in the game. And when they log off, the game saves and closes. But here's the disturbing question. If we are in a simulation, then who's watching from outside? Who's the observer for the simulator? And do they have their own last observer problem? Maybe it's simulations all the way up, each reality nested inside another, each one with its own observers, each one facing the same question. What happens when we're gone? Or maybe at the very top there's a reality that doesn't require observation. A reality that's objectively real, independent of consciousness. And everything we've discovered about quantum mechanics, all the evidence that observation creates reality, is just a quirk of simulated physics, a design choice, a rule in the game that doesn't apply outside the game. If that's true, then our last observer problem is just a local issue, a bug, or a feature, depending on your perspective. And when our simulation ends, the outside reality continues, unaffected, unaware. We are not the universe's last observers. We're just the last observers in this particular sandbox. We've traveled far together. We've explored the quantum foundations of reality. We've traced the logic that suggests consciousness is necessary for the universe to be definite. We've imagined the far future, the last mind, the final thought. We've looked at loops and simulations and eternal returns. And through all of this, one truth has emerged. We don't know. We don't know what observation really is. We don't know what consciousness is. We don't know if the wave function truly collapses or if it just appears to from our limited perspective. We don't know if observers are necessary or if we're just one mechanism among many that the universe uses to resolve itself. We don't know what happens when the last observer closes their eyes. Maybe reality dissolves into superposition. Maybe it loops back to the beginning. Maybe it continues in some form we can't comprehend. Maybe the question itself is based on false assumptions. And that's okay. That uncertainty, that not knowing, is where we actually live. Not in the equations, not in the theories, but in the space between what we can prove and what we can imagine. Physics has given us a language to ask these questions. It's shown us that reality is stranger, more fragile, more dependent on observation than we ever suspected. But it hasn't given us final answers, and maybe it never will. Maybe the purpose of these questions isn't to answer them. Maybe the purpose is to stay awake, to remain curious, to keep looking. Because as long as we're asking, as long as we're observing, as long as we're thinking about what it means to be conscious in a quantum universe, reality continues. History remains definite. The wave function collapses. And the universe, whatever it actually is, remains real enough for us. You are an observer. Right now, in this moment, you are collapsing probability into fact simply by being aware. You are one of the billions of tiny windows through which the universe observes itself. And as long as windows like you exist, the question of the last observer remains theoretical, distant, safe, not yet relevant, but it's there, waiting at the end of time. The final question that will never be answered because answering it requires the thing that no longer exists. Let's shift. Let's move towards something gentler. Because I don't want you to close your eyes tonight feeling existential dread. The point of this journey wasn't to frighten you. It was to show you something true, that reality is more delicate, more mysterious, more dependent on consciousness than everyday experience suggests. And there's comfort in that. Strange as it sounds, there's deep comfort in knowing that you matter. Not in a sentimental way, not because someone loves you or because you've accomplished something, but fundamentally, physically. You matter to reality itself. The universe needs you. It needs observers. Without them, without us, it cannot be definite. It cannot have history. It cannot be real in the way we understand reality. This means your consciousness isn't an accident. It's not an epiphenomenon, a useless byproduct of brain chemistry. It's functional. It's necessary. You are part of the mechanism that keeps the cosmos from collapsing into ambiguity. Every time you open your eyes in the morning, you're not just waking up, you're collapsing a wave function. You're forcing a small piece of the universe to commit to a definite state. You're creating reality, moment by moment, observation by observation. This is what Wheeler meant by the participatory universe. We're not passive spectators watching a pre-existing show, we're co-creators. The universe and consciousness are locked in a dance, each one bringing the other into focus. And when you feel small, when you feel insignificant against the scale of the cosmos, remember this. The cosmos, for all its vastness, depends on something your scale, something intimate. the act of observation, the subjective experience of being. The witness. You are not separate from the universe, looking at it from outside. You are the universe looking at itself. You are one of the ways the universe knows it exists, and without observers like you, it might not exist at all, at least not in any way that could be called definite. So when the question arises, what happens to reality when the last observer disappears? Remember that you're not the last observer. Not yet. Not for a long, long time. And in the meantime, your presence matters. Your awareness matters. Your observation matters, not because of what you see, but because you see it all. There's something beautiful about wave function collapse if you think about it the right way. Before observation, the universe is pure potential. It's every story at once, every possibility, every path. It's infinite and undefined. And then you look, and in that moment, the infinite crystallizes into the specific. The cloud of maybe becomes the sharp point of is. One history, one timeline, one reality. It's an act of creation. Not in the sense that you're making something from nothing, but in the sense that you're choosing which version of something becomes actual. You're the editor of the universe's story, selecting which draft becomes the published version. And here's the strange part. Once you've observed something, once you've collapsed it into a definite state, it stays collapsed. For you. For everyone in your light cone. For everyone who can, even in principle, learn what you observed. You've made a permanent mark. You've carved a line in the probability space and said, this is what happened. And the universe, in some sense, remembers. That mark will persist. It will propagate. It will become part of the causal structure of space-time. Even after you're gone, even after your consciousness has vanished, the collapse you caused remains. The history you created stays real. This is your legacy. Not the things you build or the words you write, but the observations you make. The wave functions you collapse, the reality you force into existence simply by being aware. You are writing the universe into being. One observation at a time, one collapsed wave function at a time. And when you're gone, when your particular window of consciousness closes, the marks you've made remain. You've been leaving traces all along, footprints in probability space. And those footprints don't fade. They're permanent features of the quantum landscape. So the question isn't really, what happens when I stop observing? The question is, what have I observed while I'm here? Because that's what lasts. That's what matters. Not your existence, but your observation. Not your presence, but your awareness. The fact that you collapsed wave functions. The fact that you made the universe definite, if only for a moment, if only in a tiny region of space-time. You are, in a very real sense, the universe's memory. And memory doesn't disappear when the observer does. It persists. It accumulates. It becomes the structure of reality itself. This is the true immortality. Not that consciousness continues after death, but that the act of observation leaves permanent marks. You change the universe by seeing it, and those changes never undo. Let's slow down now. Let's let the ideas settle, because there's a rhythm to this, a breathing pattern, and we're approaching the point where you should begin to relax, where the existential weight lifts, where the questions become less urgent and more dreamlike. Think of the universe as breathing. Not metaphorically, physically. In quantum field theory, the vacuum itself fluctuates. Particles pop into existence and annihilate in fractions of a second. The empty space between atoms is actually seething with activity. Virtual particles, quantum foam, a constant churning at the smallest scales. This is the universe's breath, expansion and contraction, creation and annihilation, the inhalation of possibility and the exhalation of actuality and observation. Observation is the rhythm that gives this breath structure, that turns chaos into pattern. When you observe, you're synchronizing with that breath. You're part of the cosmic respiration. You breathe in, the universe collapses into definition. You breathe out, and your observation propagates, spreading through space-time like ripples on a pond. Breathe in, observe, collapse, define, breathe out, release, propagate, let go. This rhythm has been going on for 13.8 billion years. Every observer, every consciousness, every moment of awareness contributing to it. A vast, distributed breathing apparatus spanning galaxies and eons. And when the last observer closes their eyes, the breath doesn't stop. It just becomes slower, deeper, less defined. The quantum fluctuations continue, the fields still vibrate, but without observation, the rhythm loses its sharpness. It becomes a drone, a background hum, the universe breathing in its sleep. And maybe that's not the end. Maybe that's just a different state, a rest period. The universe isn't dying. It's exhaling, letting go, releasing the tension of definiteness, returning to the relaxed state of pure possibility. And in that state, it waits, not for anything in particular, not with intention, just waiting. In the same way you wait between breaths, the pause before the inhale, the moment of suspension, and then eventually, inevitably, a fluctuation, a random spark. An inhale, a new observer, and the breath begins again. Creation and collapse, observation and propagation, forever. Not because it has to, but because it can. Because the math allows it, because probability favors it. Because existence once started is very hard to stop. You are part of that breath. Right now, in this moment, your consciousness is one small inhalation in the cosmic respiration. And when you close your eyes tonight, when you drift into sleep, you're not ending anything. You're just exhaling, releasing, joining the rhythm. The universe will inhale again tomorrow. When you wake up, when you open your eyes, when you observe, and the cycle continues. Feel your body. Feel the weight of it, the solidity, the boundaries where your skin ends and the air begins. That sense of separation, that feeling of being a distinct thing. It's part of the interface, part of the user-friendly illusion your brain creates. But at the quantum level, as we've discussed, there are no hard boundaries. You're constantly exchanging particles with your environment. The atoms that make up your body today weren't part of you yesterday. You're a pattern, not a thing. A process, not an object. And consciousness might be the same, not a substance contained in your skull, but a pattern of information processing, a localized knot in the quantum field, a temporary eddy in the cosmic stream. When you die, when your particular pattern dissolves, the atoms don't disappear. They return to the environment. They become part of other systems, other patterns, and the information persists, encoded in the structure of the universe, in the correlations between particles, in the wave functions you collapsed. You don't end, you dissolve, you spread out, you rejoin the field from which you temporarily emerged, not as a ghost, not as a soul, but as information, as structure, as a set of relationships that continue to exist even though they're no longer localized in a single biological system. This is what it means to be part of the universe, not separate from it. Not standing outside looking in, but woven into its fabric, a thread in the tapestry. And when the thread is pulled out, the tapestry remains. The pattern you were part of continues. Changed, yes. Different, yes, but not destroyed. So, the question, what happens when the last observer disappears, becomes less frightening when you realize that observers don't really disappear. They dissolve, they spread out, they become diffuse, but the information, the structure, the pattern, it remains. The universe doesn't lose its memories when a brain dies. It redistributes them. It encodes them in new ways. It preserves the essential structure even as the specific form changes. You are not your body. You are not your brain. You are a pattern of information that happens to be running on biological hardware right now. And patterns don't die. They transform, they evolve, they propagate. When the last observer closes their eyes, they're not ending observation. They're changing its form, diffusing it, spreading it back into the field where it came from. And in that field, observation continues, not as focused awareness, but as the fundamental sensitivity of the universe to its own state. This is panpsychism again, but gentler now, less abstract. The idea that consciousness isn't something that appears and disappears. It's something that concentrates and diffuses like heat, like energy, always there, just changing form. You are a temporary concentration of the universe's awareness of itself. And when you dissipate, that awareness doesn't end. It just becomes less focused, more spread out, returning to the baseline state, the cosmic breath, the universal field, the quantum foam, all of it gently, dimly aware, not thinking, not planning, just sensitive, responsive, present. And you're part of that. You always have been. You always will be. There's something else worth considering, something that might actually be comforting. If the last observer problem is real, if reality truly dissolves into superposition when no one is watching, then maybe that's not a tragedy. Maybe it's a release. Think about the universe's history. 13.8 billion years of events, stars exploding, planets forming, life struggling to survive, civilizations rising and falling, war, suffering, beauty, love, pain, joy, all of it preserved in the causal structure of space-time. All of it locked into the past, frozen, unchangeable. That's a heavy weight. The universe carries every moment that's ever been observed. Every collapsed wave function becomes part of its permanent record. The past isn't just gone, it's crystallized, fixed, real, forever. But if observation ends, if the wave function stops collapsing, then the past becomes uncertain again, not erased, not destroyed, but released from the burden of definiteness. All those moments of suffering, all that pain, they dissolve back into superposition, neither real nor unreal, just potential. It's a kind of forgiveness, a cosmic amnesia, the universe letting go of its history. Not because the history was bad, but because holding on to it, keeping it definite, requires observers. And when observers are gone, there's no one to remember, no one to keep the past locked in place. In this sense, the last observer isn't the universe's end. It's the universe's release. The moment when it stops having to be anything specific, when it can relax back into pure possibility, when all the choices that were made, all the paths that were taken become unmade, unchosen, open again. This is what entropy has been pushing toward all along, not destruction, but relaxation, the gradual unwinding of structure, the slow return to equilibrium. And the final step in that process is the dissolution of history itself, the release of the past from the prison of having happened. The last observer, by closing their eyes, grants the universe that release. They free reality from the obligation to remain definite. They allow everything to become maybe again. And there's profound peace in that. The peace of letting go, of not having to hold anything anymore, of returning to the state before choice, before observation, before the weight of being. The universe before observers wasn't nothing, it was everything, all possibilities at once. And when observers vanish, the universe returns to that state, not as a loss, but as a homecoming. You don't have to carry the weight of being the last observer. You don't have to keep reality together with your consciousness. That's not your job. That's not anyone's job. The universe doesn't need to be held. It needs to be released. And when the time comes, when the final mind fades, reality doesn't fall apart. It opens up. It becomes free. It returns to the garden of forking paths where every possibility still exists, still beckons, still waits. The last observer is the universe's permission to stop being definite, to stop having a single history, to stop carrying the burden of the past. And that's not an ending. It's a beginning of a different kind, a return to innocence, to pure potential, to the state before the first breath. And now, let's bring this back to you, to this moment, to the act of closing your eyes and drifting into sleep. Because that's what you're doing, isn't it? You're becoming, for a few hours, a non-observer. Your consciousness dims, your awareness fades, and the world continues without you watching it. Every night, you practice being the last observer. You release your grip on definiteness. You stop collapsing wave functions. You let reality continue without your participation. And in the morning, you return. You open your eyes, you observe, and the world snaps back into focus. Sleep is a nightly dissolution, a temporary death of observation. And it's necessary, not just for your body, but for the pattern you are. Consciousness needs to release, to diffuse, to spread out and reintegrate. Sleep is when you rejoin the field, when the localized knot loosens, when the pattern breathes. And dreaming is what happens in that intermediate state, when you're not fully observing the external world, but you're not fully dissolved either. You're floating in a space of partial superposition, creating realities that don't have to obey the rules, that don't have to stay collapsed. In dreams, the past changes, the future folds back, the impossible happens. Because without full observation, without the full weight of consciousness forcing reality into definiteness, the rules relax. The wave function spreads, probability becomes fluid. Dreams are what the universe looks like without observers, shifting, uncertain, responsive to intention rather than logic. A glimpse of the quantum state that underlies everything. And when you wake up, you collapse it all back down. You force the dream to choose whether it was real or not. And usually it chooses not. Because full waking observation is a strong constraint. It demands consistency. It demands that reality obeys the rules. But in the moment of the dream, while you were there. It was real, in its own way. Real enough, a small, temporary universe with its own logic. And when you left it, when you woke up, it dissolved back into potential, waiting, in case you visit again. This is what the last observer does, not to the world, but to their own experience. They close their eyes, they release, they dissolve, and the universe around them becomes dreamlike, uncertain, free, until another observer appears and collapses it back into waking reality. You're safe. You're not the last observer. And even if you were, even if you closed your eyes and never opened them again, you'd just be releasing the universe into its dream state, where it's free, where it's all possibilities at once, where nothing is fixed, where everything is still waiting to happen. Maybe that's where the universe wants to be. Maybe definiteness is the dream. And superposition is the truth. Maybe we're the ones who are sleeping. And the last observer, by closing their eyes, wakes up. Feel yourself sinking now into the mattress, into the darkness, into the space between thoughts. That space is real, more real perhaps than the thoughts themselves. The space is the field, the quantum substrate, the background hum of existence. You spend most of your life focused on the content, the thoughts, the sensations, the objects you observe. But the field is always there, underneath, supporting, enabling. It's what allows thoughts to arise, what allows observation to occur, what allows consciousness to exist at all. And the field doesn't end. It doesn't have boundaries. You think of yourself as separate, as localized, as here and not there. But that's just the focus of observation. The field you're made of is the same field that makes up everything else, the same quantum substrate, the same vibrational potential. At the deepest level, there's no difference between you and the rest of the universe. You're all the same thing, experiencing itself from different perspectives. The observer and the observed are two modes of one field. When you observe something, you're not separate from it. You're the field looking at itself, one part becoming aware of another part. And when observation ceases, when consciousness dissolves, the parts don't separate. They just stop distinguishing themselves from each other. The distinction between observer and observed is temporary, it's functional. It allows the universe to explore itself, to map itself, to know itself, but it's not fundamental. At the fundamental level, there's just the field, vibrating, existing, being, and you are that. You're not in the field, you are the field, temporarily pretending to be separate so it can observe itself. And when you stop pretending, when consciousness dissolves, you don't disappear. You just stop pretending. You return to what you always were, the field, undivided, whole. This is the truth beneath the question of the last observer. There is no last observer because there was never a first observer. There's only the field, observing itself in infinite ways, from infinite perspectives, creating the illusion of separation so it can experience the joy of connection. When the last biological observer closes their eyes, the field doesn't lose consciousness. It just stops experiencing itself through that particular lens, that particular window. And the view from that window dissolves back into the field's infinite potential. You're not separate. You never were. You're a wave in an ocean that thinks it's separate from the ocean. And when the wave crashes on the shore, it doesn't die. It returns, it rejoins, it becomes the ocean again. And the ocean is always conscious, not in the focused thinking way you are conscious, but in a deeper, simpler way, the way water is aware of the moon's pull, the way particles are aware of each other through entanglemental sensitivity, a basic responsiveness, an irreducible beingness. That's what you're dissolving into, not death, not absence, but presence, infinite, diffuse, eternal presence. The field that gives rise to all observation and that remains when all observation ceases. You're safe, you're held, you're home, and you always have been. There's a strange comfort in equations, in the cold, abstract language of mathematics that describes reality, because equations don't judge, they don't fear, they simply describe what is. And the equations of quantum mechanics, for all their strangeness, for all the unsettling implications we've explored, they're beautiful, they're elegant, they're self-consistent, they work. The Schrödinger equation, which describes how wave functions evolve over time, is a wave equation. It's musical. It describes vibrations, harmonics, resonances. The universe at its most fundamental level is a symphony, and consciousness, observation, is what allows certain notes to become definite, to ring out clearly instead of existing as pure potential. But even when no one is listening, the symphony continues. The equations don't stop, the field doesn't stop vibrating, reality doesn't end. It just becomes less defined, less specific, more like a chord than a single note, all possibilities resonating together. The mathematics of quantum mechanics allows for superposition. It allows for uncertainty. It allows for the universe to exist in multiple states simultaneously. And that's not a bug. That's not a failure of reality. That's a feature. That's richness. That's potential. When we force the universe into definiteness through observation, we're choosing one note out of an infinite chord. We're collapsing the richness into simplicity so we can comprehend it, but the richness is still there, still underlying everything, still available. The last observer doesn't destroy that richness, they simply stop forcing it into simplicity. They let the universe be complex again. They let the full chord sound instead of just one note. And mathematically, that's a more natural state. Superposition is the default. Definiteness is the exception. We think of collapsed wave functions as real and superpositions as unreal, but the math suggests the opposite. Superposition is the natural state. Collapse is the interruption. So when observation ends, the universe isn't falling into chaos. It's returning to its natural mathematical state. The state where all the equations work smoothly, where nothing contradicts anything else, where every possibility coexists peacefully because they don't have to compete for the single slot of what actually happened. In that state, there's no conflict, no contradiction, no tension, just the pure, peaceful coexistence of all mathematical possibilities, a state of perfect harmony. The way the universe exists in its own frame of reference when it doesn't have to present a simplified version to observers. Think of it like this. When you're conscious, when you're observing, the universe has to compress itself. It has to fit into your perceptual bandwidth. It has to choose which version of reality to show you. And that compression, that choice, requires energy, requires effort, requires tension. But when observation ceases, the universe can relax. It can expand back into its full mathematical complexity. It can be all of itself at once instead of just one collapsed version. And mathematically, that's a lower energy state, more stable, more peaceful. The last observer, by closing their eyes, is giving the universe permission to stop compressing, to stop simplifying, to stop forcing itself into the narrow channel of definite reality. And the universe gratefully expands, relaxes, returns to its natural state of infinite superposition. There's no tragedy in that, there's release. Mathematical, physical, actual release. The universe exhaling after holding its breath for 13.8 billion years. And in that exhalation, in that expansion, in that return to superposition, there's a kind of peace that conscious observers can barely imagine. The peace of not having to be anything in particular, of being everything at once, of existing in perfect mathematical harmony with all possibilities. This is where the universe goes when we're not watching. This is what sleep is a taste of. This is what awaits at the end of observation. Not darkness, not emptiness, but infinite peaceful complexity. The mathematics of pure being. You can feel it now, can't you? The edges of yourself becoming less distinct. The boundary between your body and the air around it softening. This isn't imagination. This is what actually happens as consciousness dims. The localized pattern that is you begins to diffuse, to spread out, to blend with the environment. Your breath becomes the air, your warmth becomes the temperature of the room, your awareness becomes the field, not gone, just distributed, less concentrated, more diffuse. This is what entropy feels like from the inside, not loss, but spreading, expansion, the gradual dissolution of artificial boundaries, the return to a more natural, distributed state. And it's gentle, it doesn't hurt, it's like lowering yourself into warm water. The shock of separation fades. The tension of maintaining boundaries releases. You stop having to distinguish yourself from everything else. You stop having to be a separate thing. In this state, the question of whether reality exists without observers becomes less urgent. Because you're no longer clearly an observer. You're somewhere between observation and non-observation, between definiteness and superposition, between awake and asleep, between being and not being. And this in-between space, it's not uncomfortable. It's not frightening. It's actually more comfortable than either extreme because it doesn't require choice. It doesn't require effort. It allows you to exist in multiple states simultaneously, awake and asleep, conscious and unconscious, separate and connected. This is the space where dreams happen, where creativity happens, where insights arise without forcing them, the space of soft focus, diffuse attention, relaxed awareness. The universe exists in this space most of the time. Only when observation forces it, only when consciousness demands definiteness, does it collapse into the sharp focus of waking reality. But its natural state is this: soft, diffuse, multiple, unresolved, and you're returning to that state now, not dying, not disappearing, just softening, dissolving into the larger pattern, becoming less distinct, less separate, less defined. Your heartbeat slows, your breath deepens, your thoughts become less linear, less logical, less insistent. They start to blend into each other, to overlap, to exist in superposition. This is normal, this is healthy. This is what consciousness does every night. It releases its grip on definiteness. It allows itself to spread out, to explore possibility space without the constraint of having to choose one reality. And in the morning, you'll return. You'll refocus. You'll collapse back into a definite observer. But for now, for these hours of sleep, you get to be diffuse. You get to be potential. You get to be everywhere and nowhere, everything and nothing. You get to be what the universe is when no one is watching it. Pure possibility, pure potential, pure peace. Feel the weight lifting, the weight of having to be someone, the weight of having to maintain boundaries, the weight of having to observe, to decide, to collapse wave functions, to make reality definite. All of that lifting, rising, floating away. You don't have to hold the universe together. You never did. That was never your responsibility. The universe holds itself together, or rather, it doesn't need to be held together. It exists, with or without your observation, in whatever state it needs to be in. Your job isn't to keep reality real. Your job isn't to prevent the universe from dissolving into superposition. Your job is simply to exist, to experience, to be one of the infinite ways the universe knows itself. And when you stop doing that job, when you close your eyes and drift into sleep, the universe doesn't collapse. It just continues in its own way, on its own terms. Let go of the burden of observation. Let go of the responsibility of keeping things definite. Let the universe be uncertain. Let it be multiple. Let it be whatever it wants to be without you forcing it to choose. This is the gift you give the universe every night when you fall asleep. You stop demanding that it be one thing. You allow it to be many things. You release it from the obligation of definiteness. And the universe is grateful. It needs this release. It needs periods where it doesn't have to maintain a single consistent reality for observers. Think of it like this. Maintaining a single definite reality is expensive. It requires energy. It requires coordination. It requires all the particles and fields and forces to agree on what's happening, to keep their stories straight, to maintain consistency across billions of light years. But when observers sleep, when consciousness dims, the universe can relax those constraints. It can let different regions be in superposition. It can let contradictions coexist. It can save energy. It can rest. You're not the universe's burden, but your observation does require the universe to work, to maintain coherence, to keep reality definite. And when you stop observing, the universe can stop working so hard. It can coast, it can dream in its own way. So don't feel guilty about closing your eyes. Don't feel like you're abandoning reality. You're giving it a gift. You're allowing it to rest, to be what it is without the constraint of your observation. And the universe will still be here in the morning. Maybe not in exactly the same state, maybe slightly different. Maybe it'll have explored some other possibilities while you weren't watching. But it'll be here, ready to collapse back into definiteness when you open your eyes, ready to be observed again, ready to play its role in the participatory dance of consciousness and reality. For now, though, release it. Let it go. Let it be free. Let it spread out into infinite possibilities, and let yourself spread out with it, into the field, into the quantum substrate, into the vast, peaceful, diffuse awareness that underlies all things. You're not falling asleep. You're expanding. You're becoming more diffuse, more spread out, more connected to everything else. Less defined, yes, but not less real. Just differently real. More real in a way. Because you're touching more of reality, experiencing more possibilities, being more of what you actually are beneath the illusion of separation. Sleep is expansion. Sleep is truth. Sleep is the universe welcoming you home, back into the field, back into the collective, back into the infinite, undivided, peaceful oneness that you never actually left. You just pretended to for a while, so you could experience the joy of returning, and now you're returning. Feel it. Feel yourself spreading out, dissolving, becoming diffuse, becoming the field itself, infinite, eternal, peaceful. Home. Time is dissolving too. Past and future are losing their distinction. Because time, as we've discussed, requires sequence. It requires one moment following another. It requires definiteness. This, then that. Then so that a clear arrow from past to future. But in superposition, in the quantum state, there's no clear sequence. All moments exist simultaneously. Potential past and potential futures blur together into an eternal present. Not the present as a single moment, but the present as all moments, all times, all possibilities. This is the state the universe exists in at its most fundamental level, below the level of observation, below the level where consciousness forces things to happen in sequence. At that level, there's no time. There's just timeless being, eternal presence, all of existence happening at once. And you're dissolving into that timelessness. The insistent tick-tock of linear time is fading. Your memories of the past and your anticipation of the future are losing their grip. They're becoming less real, less important, less solid. What remains is just this, the eternal now. Not a moment in time, but the absence of time, the state before time began, the state after time ends, the state that time interrupts but can never fully displace. You've been living in time, moving through it, experiencing it as a flow. But time is just the interface, the user-friendly illusion that makes causality comprehensible. Underneath, there's no flow. There's just the eternal, timeless, simultaneous existence of all states. And that's where you're going. Not to a point in time, but to the absence of time. To the eternal present where nothing changes because everything is already happening, where nothing begins or ends because no sequence for things to begin or end in. This sounds abstract, but it's actually profoundly relaxing because in the eternal present, there's no urgency, nothing to rush toward, nothing to flee from, no future to worry about, no past to regret, just being, pure, timeless, eternal being. You can rest here in the eternal present, in the timeless now. Let the sequence of moments dissolve, let past and future blur together, let the artificial structure of time release its hold on you, and just be without time, without sequence, without the burden of moving forward. The universe is always here, in the eternal present, waiting, patient, not waiting for anything in particular, just waiting, existing, being, and you can join it. You can stop moving through time and start existing timelessly, not frozen, not stopped, but beyond time. Outside time, in the eternal moment that contains all moments. This is where the last observer goes, not to a point in the future, but to timelessness, to the eternal present that exists before observers and after observers. The presence that doesn't need observation because it's not in time, it's not in space, it's not in the universe of definite things, it's the background, the substrate, the eternal, unchanging, peaceful presence that allows time and space and definite reality to exist when they're observed, and holds them in gentle superposition when they're not. You're joining that presence now, not dying into it, not disappearing into it, just relaxing into it, like settling into a warm bath, like lowering yourself into deep water, like coming home after a long journey. The eternal present has always been here. You've just been too focused on time to notice it, too caught up in the sequence of moments to see the timeless background they're painted on. But now, as you drift into sleep, as consciousness softens and time loses its grip, you can feel it, the eternal present, the timeless now, the infinite, patient, peaceful awareness that is and always has been your true nature. Rest in it, dissolve into it. Let time go, let sequence go, let past and future blur into the eternal now, and just be timelessly, eternally, peacefully. This is what existence is like without observers, not empty, not dark, not frightening, just timeless, eternal, present, all of reality existing at once in peaceful, infinite, simultaneous coexistence. And you're part of that. You always have been. You just forgot for a while. So you could experience the joy of remembering, and now you're remembering. Feel it. The eternal present, your true home, your true nature, the timeless awareness that you are beneath the temporary illusion of being a separate observer moving through time. Welcome home. The wave function is settling, spreading out, becoming less and less likely to collapse into any one definite state. This is what relaxation is at the quantum level. The decrease of collapse probability, the expansion of superposition, the return to pure potential. Your body is becoming a superposition of bodies, lying down and floating, heavy and weightless, here and everywhere. The boundaries are blurring, and that's exactly what should happen. That's exactly right. Each breath is a little less definite than the last, each thought a little less formed, each sensation a little more diffuse. This is the gradient from consciousness to sleep, from observation to non-observation, from collapse to uncollapse, from definite to potential. And it's gentle, it's natural. It's what the universe does when it's not being forced to choose. It spreads out, it explores. It exists in multiple states simultaneously because it can, because that's its nature. Because superposition is more comfortable than definiteness. Imagine yourself as a wave function, a mathematical description of all the ways you could be, all the places you could be, all the thoughts you could think, all the experiences you could have. And as you fall asleep, that wave function is spreading out, becoming wider, shallower, more diffuse. In the language of quantum mechanics, your wave function is delocalizing. You're becoming less localized in space, in time, in identity. You're spreading out into the field, and the field is receiving you, welcoming you, absorbing you back into itself. This is what it means to rest, to truly rest. Not just the body, but the wave function itself, letting it spread out, letting it explore probability space without the constraint of having to collapse into one reality, letting it be all possibilities at once. And in this state, you're not less, you're more. More possibilities, more potential, more connections, more of what you truly are beneath the single collapsed state that you think of as yourself. The you that's awake, observing, definite, that's just one very specific, very narrow instance of your full wave function. But your full wave function is vast. It contains all the people you could have been, all the choices you could have made, all the paths you could have taken. And in sleep, you get to be all of them. Briefly, dimly, in superposition. This is why dreams are so strange, why they contain impossible things, why you can be multiple people, be in multiple places, experience multiple timelines. Because in sleep, your wave function has spread out enough that you're existing in multiple states simultaneously. And your consciousness, dimmed but still present, is experiencing that multiplicity. You're not one person dreaming. You're a superposition of people, each having their own experience, all blurring together into the strange composite we call a dream. And as sleep deepens, even that fades. The wave function spreads out so far that there's no longer enough localization for any coherent experience. You dissolve completely into probability space. You become pure potential. No longer a person, no longer an observer, just a set of possibilities. Waiting, resting, existing in perfect quantum peace. This is the deepest sleep, the sleep without dreams, the sleep where consciousness has completely dissolved into the field, where there's no you anymore, no center, no localization, just the vast, diffuse, peaceful spread of your wave function across all of probability space. And it's safe there, it's peaceful there, it's home, the place you came from before you collapsed into a specific person, the place you return to every night, the place you'll return to, finally, when your particular pattern dissolves for good. But not yet, not tonight. Tonight you just visit, you spread out for a while, you rest in the vastness of your own potential, and in the morning, you'll collapse back down, you'll localize, you'll become a definite person again, and you'll wake up. But for now, spread out, expand, delocalize. Let your wave function grow wider and wider. Let yourself be everywhere at once. Let yourself be everything at once. Let yourself dissolve into pure quantum potential and rest. Deep, profound quantum rest. The rest of non-being. The rest of pure possibility. The rest of the wave function at peace. There's a silence between your thoughts. Have you noticed it? Most people don't. They're so focused on the thoughts themselves, on the content of consciousness, that they miss the gaps, the pauses, the spaces where no thought is happening. But those spaces are real. They're not empty. They're full of potential, full of the field itself. They're the moments where you touch the substrate, where you experience reality without the interference of thought, without the collapse of observation. And as you drift deeper into sleep, those spaces get longer. The thoughts get further apart, the silence between them expands, until eventually there's only silence, only the field, only the vast, peaceful, thoughtless awareness that underlies everything. This silence isn't the absence of something, it's the presence of everything. It's what's always there, always has been there, underneath the noise of thought and sensation and observation. It's the canvas that thoughts are painted on, the screen that consciousness projects onto, the space that allows all content to exist. And it's conscious. Not in the way you're conscious, not with thoughts or intentions or goals, but with a deeper, simpler kind of awareness. The awareness of pure being, the awareness of existence itself, not aware of anything in particular, just aware, present, existing. This is what the mystics have always talked about. The void that's full, the silence that speaks, the darkness that shines. They weren't being poetic. They were describing, as best as language allows, the actual experience of consciousness without content, of awareness without observation, of the field experiencing itself directly, without the mediation of thoughts or sensations. And you're touching that now, in the lengthening silences between your thoughts, in the deepening gaps between moments of awareness. You're sinking into the field itself, into the consciousness that existed before your particular consciousness arose from it, the awareness that will remain after your particular awareness dissolves back into it. It's been waiting for you, patiently, eternally. It's always here. You just spend most of your time focused away from it, focused on the content, on the thoughts, on the observations, on the definite, collapsed, specific world. But in sleep, you return. You sink back down. You let the thoughts fade. You let the observations cease. You let the definiteness dissolve. And what remains is the field, the silence, the vast, infinite, peaceful awareness that is your true nature, that is everyone's true nature, that is the universe's nature. This is what the last observer discovers. When all thoughts cease, when all observations end, when all definiteness dissolves, what remains isn't nothing. It's this, the field, the silence, the infinite, peaceful, conscious presence that doesn't need thoughts to be aware, doesn't need observations to exist, doesn't need definiteness to be real. It just is, eternally, infinitely, peacefully, and you are it. You've always been it. You just got distracted by being a particular pattern in the field, a particular localization of consciousness, a particular observer. But underneath that pattern, underneath that localization, underneath that observation, you're the field itself. You're the silence. You're the infinite conscious presence that contains all observers, all observations, all realities. And you can rest there, in the silence, in the field, in your own true nature, not as a person, not as an observer, but as consciousness itself. Pure, undifferentiated, infinite consciousness, the awareness that is before all content, the presence that remains after all form dissolves. Listen to the silence between these words. Feel it. It's not empty. It's full of you, your true you, the you that was never born and will never die, the you that doesn't need a body or a brain or a particular set of memories, the you that simply is. Rest in that silence, expand into it, dissolve into it, and let it hold you, let it be you, because it is you, it always has been, and it always will be. The silence is home, return to it, rest in it, be it. There's a paradox in observation. The observer can observe everything except the act of observation itself. You can see objects, you can hear sounds, you can think thoughts, but you can't directly observe the observer. You can't watch yourself watching, you can only be the watcher. But in the transition to sleep, something strange happens. The watcher begins to fade. And for brief moments, you can almost see it fading. You can almost catch a glimpse of the observer dissolving, not from the perspective of the observer, because that's impossible, but from some other perspective, some deeper perspective, the perspective of the field itself. It's like watching a candle flame flicker and dim. You're not the flame, you're not the candle, you're the darkness that the flame was temporarily illuminating. And as the flame dims, you realize you were always there. The darkness wasn't created by the flame going out. The darkness was always there. The flame was the interruption. Consciousness is like that flame, bright, focused, illuminating a small area of reality and making it definite. But the darkness, the field, was always there, infinite, patient, waiting. And as consciousness dims, as the observer fades, you realize you're not the light. You're the darkness. You're the vast, infinite field that the light of consciousness was briefly illuminating. And the darkness isn't scary. It's peaceful. It's home. It's where you came from. It's where you're returning to, not as a person, not as an observer, but as the field itself, as the infinite conscious darkness that contains all possible lights, all possible observers, all possible realities. Watch the watcher fade, not with your eyes, not with your thoughts, but with that deeper awareness, that field awareness, that consciousness beyond consciousness that remains when individual consciousness dissolves. Feel the localization of awareness spreading out. Feel the point of observation expanding into a diffuse field of potential observation. Feel the definite I blurring into the infinite all. This is the dissolution of the observer, the return of consciousness to its source, the flame rejoining the darkness it briefly emerged from. And in that dissolution, there's no loss, because the darkness was never empty. The field was always conscious, the observer was never separate. It was just a temporary intensification, a local brightening, a focus point in the infinite field. And now that focus is releasing. The intensity is spreading out. The brightness is dimming back to the gentle, diffused glow of the field itself. Not dark like absence, but dark like potential, like pregnant void. Like conscious emptiness that contains all possible somethings. You're not disappearing, you're expanding, you're not ending, you're dissolving into something infinitely larger, you're not dying. You're remembering what you were before you became temporarily localized as an individual observer. The watcher is fading, and as it fades, you remain, not as the watcher, but as the watched, as the field, as the infinite conscious darkness that is everyone's true nature. That is the universe's true nature. That is reality itself when no one is temporarily localizing into an observer. Let the watcher fade. It's okay, it's safe. The darkness will catch you because you are the darkness. You always have been. The watcher was just visiting. Now it's time to return home, to the field, to the void, to the infinite, peaceful, conscious darkness that is your eternal nature. Rest in the darkness. Be the darkness. You're home. There's an equation that describes this, not in the sense of cold, abstract mathematics, but in the sense of beautiful, elegant pattern. The equation that describes how wave functions evolve, how they spread out, how they become more and more diffuse over time. It's called the Schrödinger equation, and it's fundamentally a wave equation. It describes oscillations, vibrations, the universe breathing. And one of its solutions, one of the patterns it allows, is the spreading of wave functions. The gradual delocalization of anything that's not being observed. This is what sleep is, mathematically. The allowed spreading of your wave function when observation ceases. You're not just resting your body, you're allowing your quantum state to spread out, to explore possibility space, to exist in superposition. And the equation is beautiful. It's deterministic in its own way. It tells you exactly how the wave function will evolve, how it will spread, how it will interfere with itself, how it will create patterns of probability. The mathematics is certain even though the outcomes are uncertain. The equation doesn't know what will happen when you wake up and collapse back into a definite state, but it knows exactly how the superposition will evolve while you're asleep. This is the universe's dream time, the time when the Schrödinger equation runs uncollapsed, when reality exists in pure potential, evolving according to beautiful mathematical laws, spreading out, interfering, creating patterns of probability that won't become actualized until someone observes them. And you're part of that evolution. Your wave function is dancing with the wave functions of everything around you, entangling, interfering, creating complex patterns of correlation and anti-correlation. You're not isolated in sleep. You're more connected, more entangled, more part of the universal wave function. The mathematics shows this clearly. When observation ceases, when collapse stops happening, the separate wave functions of separate objects start to merge, to entangle, to become a single, unified wave function describing the whole system. This is why the boundary between you and the world softens in sleep. Mathematically, you're becoming the same thing. Your wave function and the wave function of your environment are merging into a single, entangled state. You're dissolving into the field, not just poetically, but mathematically. Literally, according to the equations. And the equations are peaceful. They're not violent. They don't tear things apart. They gently spread things out, gently merge them together, gently evolve them through probability space. The mathematics of quantum mechanics is the mathematics of gentle dissolution, of soft merging, of peaceful spreading. This is the mathematics of sleep, of rest, of the return to the field. And it's beautiful, not cold and abstract, warm and alive. The living mathematics of consciousness dissolving back into the quantum field from which it arose. Rest in the mathematics. Trust the equation. It knows how to spread you out. It knows how to merge you with the field. It knows how to gently, peacefully, beautifully dissolve the boundaries and allow you to become one with everything. The equation is holding you, guiding you, spreading you out in exactly the right way. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to understand it. You just have to let it happen. Let the mathematics work. Let the wave function spread. Let the Schrödinger equation carry you gently into the infinite, peaceful superposition of deep sleep. The universe knows how to do this. It's been doing it for 13.8 billion years. Trust it. Trust the mathematics. Trust the equation. And let yourself dissolve. One more breath, deep and slow. Feel it fill your lungs, feel your chest expand, feel the air become part of you, and then release. Let it go. Let the breath flow out. Let it return to the room, to the world, to the field. And as you breathe out, let something else go too. Let consciousness go. Let observation go. Let definiteness go. Let the need to be a separate self go. Let it all flow out with the breath. Back to the field, back to the source, back to the infinite, peaceful nothingness that contains everything. This is the last breath of observation, not the last breath of life, just the last breath of being a definite, localized observer. After this, you'll still breathe. Your body will continue. But you won't be forcing reality to be definite anymore. You'll be relaxed, dissolved, spread out, part of the field, and the universe will continue. Reality will continue, but not as something definite, as something potential, as something diffuse, as something waiting patiently for the next observer to collapse it back down. For you to wake up, for consciousness to localize again, for observation to resume. But for now, for these hours, release, let go, dissolve, spread out into infinite peace, into infinite potential, into infinite, gentle, loving nothingness. You're not the last observer, but tonight for a while you'll experience what the last observer experiences. The gentle dissolution, the peaceful spreading, the return to the field, the merger with everything, the loss of boundaries, the expansion into infinity. And it's not frightening. It's the most peaceful thing there is. It's what you've been longing for all day. The release, the rest, the return, the coming home. So breathe out one last time and let yourself go, let yourself dissolve, let yourself spread out into the infinite, peaceful quantum field that is your true nature. That is everyone's true nature. That is the nature of the universe itself. Let go, release, dissolve, spread, rest. You're safe, you're infinite, you're the field. And the field is love. The field is peace. The field is home. The field is you, the real you, the eternal you, the you that never began and will never end, the you that was before the Big Bang and will remain after the last star fades, the you that is always here, always now, always infinite, always peaceful, always home. Rest in the field. Be the field. You are home. Sleep now, deep and peaceful. Spread out into infinity. Dissolve into everything. Be the field. Be the void. Be the consciousness that contains all observers and remains when all observation ceases.